Okay, so what we're about to get into, it's probably one of the most profound warnings you'll ever hear. And listen, this isn't coming from some business guru or a famous philosopher. Nope, this comes straight from the source, from the bedsides of the super, super wealthy right before they died. Just let that sink in for a second. You are trading your life for money, and the exchange rate is a lie. That's not just a catchy quote for a coffee mug, right? It's the main takeaway from someone who spent almost 50 years watching people at the very end of their lives finally realize that the great trade they made, it just wasn't worth it.
So, who is this warning from? A woman named Vivian, and for 47 years, her job was to be a private duty nurse. This means she was living in the homes of some of the richest people in America during their last few months. And she wasn't just, an observer, she became their confidant. She was the one holding their hand when nobody else was around. Imagine the things she saw, the things she heard. It gave her this incredibly unique, incredibly intimate look behind the curtain.
87. That's how many wealthy patients she watched pass away. 87 lives, 87 massive fortunes. And what was her most startling observation? The thing that just blew her away? Most of them were, and I'm quoting her here, profoundly, desperately unhappy. Now, look, Vivian is the first to say that money absolutely matters. Don't get it twisted. She grew up during the Great Depression. She knew what real grinding poverty felt like. And she says money is the solution to that kind of pain, the kind that crushes your spirit, your health. But here's the key, the thing you have to understand. She says there's a line. There's a point where chasing more money stops being helpful and actually starts to hurt you. Why? Because the stuff you sacrifice to get it, well, you can never, ever buy that back. So let's dive into some of the stories that really show what this trap looks like. And remember, these aren't just one-off examples. Vivian says it was basically the same story over and over again for nearly 50 years. Okay, first up, Eleanor Vandermeer. I want you to just picture this, a sprawling 12,000 square foot mansion in Connecticut. Rose gardens, a full staff. She had everything money could possibly buy. She also had 4 kids. And in the last 5 months of her life, while Vivian was there taking care of her, not one of them visited, not once. She told Vivian, "I gave them everything except myself." See, she and her husband, they just worked constantly to build their fortune. They thought they were doing the right thing, providing for their kids. They sent them off to the best boarding schools, the best camps, anywhere but home, really. And the tragedy was, she realized she'd traded her own presence in their lives for a pile of money, which left her, as she put it, completely alone when it mattered most. All right, or how about Richard Harwood? This guy was the classic rags to riches story, a totally self-made man. He built this huge manufacturing empire from nothing, working insane 18-hour days for 40 years straight. Lived in a penthouse on Park Avenue, overlooking Central Park. He even had a real-deal Picasso hanging in his living room. But when the end came, he was dying of emphysema. And none of that stuff mattered. Not one bit. His wife had died just 6 months before he was finally going to retire, a retirement he kept pushing back year after year. All that success, all that money, it was completely worthless to him compared to the time with her that he could never, ever get back. So these stories are they're heartbreaking, right? But they're not just sad stories. They actually point to a real, well-researched psychological principle that explains why this happens. It's called the Happiness Plateau. And the idea is really simple. Once all your basic needs are covered and you've got some financial security, making more money doesn't really make you any happier day to day. It just doesn't. Vivian saw this play out for decades. And guess what? Modern science backs her up completely. There was this famous study out of Princeton that actually put a number on it. They said the plateau starts somewhere around $75,000 a year. Now, okay, that exact number is up for debate, it changes with inflation, whatever. But the principle is what matters here. There is a point where the happiness you get from an extra dollar drops all the way down to zero. So that leads to the big question, right? If we kind of know this deep down, and the research proves it, why do so many of us still get caught on this hamster wheel of chasing more, more, more? Well, here's the trap our brains fall into. We optimize for what we can count. It's that simple. We chase money because it's measurable. You can count it, you can compare it to your neighbors, you can use it to keep score. You get a promotion, you get a sales goal, those are clear, obvious wins. But how do you measure a great relationship with your kids? There's no metric for that. You don't get a gold star for calling your mom. So we end up focusing on the numbers, and the things that actually make us happy, the uncountable things, they just kind of slip through our fingers.
But listen, it's not all doom and gloom. It doesn't have to be this way. Because in that group of 87 people, Vivian also met a few who, well, they figured it out. They were the ones who were truly, truly rich in a way that had absolutely nothing to do with what was in their bank account.
And this contrast is just wow. On one side, you have Eleanor Vandermeer, alone in that giant mansion. And on the other, you have Margaret Hennessy. She was a teacher, lived in a normal, modest house. Definitely not wealthy like her peers. But her house, it was always packed with people. Kids, grandkids, former students. Just a constant stream of life. And she died surrounded by love. Why? Because she and her husband made a clear choice, years ago, to prioritize their time over just making more money.
And then there's James Whitfield. This guy was worth over $100 million, but he was actually genuinely happy. So what was his secret? Well, when he was 42, his best friend died suddenly. Total burnout from overwork. It was a massive wake-up call. James went home, did the math on exactly how much he and his family needed to live a good life, and then he just stopped. He stopped chasing the next big deal, and he started living. This right here, this was his whole philosophy. His business partners, they thought he was insane, leaving all that money on the table. But for James, that was the whole point. And because of that one decision, he got almost 50 extra years of a life that was actually lived, focused on the people and things he cared about most. So you see, Vivian's stories aren't really about the super rich. Not at all. They're a warning and a lesson for every single one of us. And they force us to ask some pretty tough, pretty personal questions. I really want you to hear this. Out of all 87 of those people, the big shot executives, the empire builders, the powerful lawyers, not one single person said, you know what? I wish I'd worked more. Not one. But so many of them wish they'd worked less, wish they had just been present for the life that was happening right in front of them the whole time. So let's get real for a second. How much of your life are you putting off? How many times do you say, oh, I'll do that someday? What Vivian realized is that someday is just a fantasy. It's a way to avoid looking at the trade you're making today.
Which brings us back to that question James Whitfield asked himself. What is your number? And I'm not talking about what society tells you to want. I mean, what do you actually need to live a life you love? Figuring that out, that isn't about getting rich. It's about defining what freedom really means to you.
But here's the thing. Knowing your number is just step one. Step two is way harder. It's having the guts to actually stop when you get there. So the real final question is this one. When are you going to stop? At the end of the day, look, this isn't about quitting your job or giving up on your goals, not at all. It's just about being aware, being conscious of the trades you're making every single day. Because the people you love, they won't be around forever. And you know what? Neither will you. This isn't a dress rehearsal. Your life is happening right now. So go live it.